Welcome back to Steel City Sports. So we are now officially in playoff mode with the NFL with Wildcard weekend starting tomorrow. So definitely stay tuned here on the channel. We're going to have a lot to talk about. We're going to be reacting to all of these games after they happen. So I can't wait for that. But in today's video, we're going to give out all my official predictions for Wildcard weekend. So I do want to start off in the AFC with the 4-5 matchup being the Chargers going to Houston to play the Texans. Very fascinating matchup. You know, if you would have told me before the season started this was a playoff matchup, I thought this would have been like a 2-7 matchup with Houston being the 2 seed, the Chargers being the 7 seed, because you got to keep in mind, the Chargers were a 5-win team last year. I think that obviously reflects more on how much of a moron Brandon Staley was and how good of a job Harbaugh has done. But the Chargers have definitely had a very impressive season. Houston, kind of the opposite of that. Houston has been a bit of a disappointment this year for me. This was a team that I thought could threaten to be the 1 seed this year, but C.J. Stroud obviously in the midst of a massive sophomore slump. So when we take a look at this game in particular, I find it fascinating that the sports books actually favor the Chargers. The Chargers are 3-point favorites in this one, which is insane to me. The Chargers being a road playoff favorite is something you almost never really see, especially in a 4-5 matchup where, you know, it's looked at so close. But here's 2 main reasons why I am going to pick the Los Angeles Chargers in this matchup. The number one thing is there is a massive discrepancy in one of the matchups between the Houston Texans offensive line versus the LA Chargers pass rush is almost not fair. With how dreadfully bad the Texans O-line has been this year, I think really all the cause for Stroud's kind of disappointment this year has been because of their offensive line, which I don't really understand because it's the same O-line he had last year and he was so much better as a rookie, but that's a topic for another day. But the Texans O-line outside of Laramie Tunsil is an absolute train wreck. And when you put that up against one of the most productive pass rushes in the NFL with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, obviously with Harbaugh putting a large emphasis on controlling the line of scrimmages, you know, O-line and D-line, that's going to be, I think, an absolute nightmare for C.J. Stroud to have to deal with that constant pass rush, because if you just watch Texan games this year, Stroud barely has any time to throw the ball. And it'd be one thing if they were going up against like a pedestrian pass rush, but to go up against an elite unit like the Chargers, I think that is going to be the X factor in this game, is the Chargers' ability to just crush Houston's O-line. And my second reason is, and we're going to take a look at this element for each and every matchup, is for playoff games, I like to look at who has the coaching advantage and who has the quarterback advantage. And most of the time, the team that has the advantage in both those categories wins the football game, because obviously, all these teams are good. They're playoff teams. But especially when we have close matchups like a 4-5 matchup, it's so close. I want to look at the 2 most important positions, coach and quarterback. So with the Chargers versus Texans, the coaching advantage, as much as I like DeMeco Ryans, has to go to Harbaugh. I mean, Harbaugh has immediately come in. I mean, kind of similar to what DeMeco did last year with Houston, completely changing around the culture. Harbaugh going to a 5-win team, winning the Natty last year. You know, I think DeMeco Ryans is a really high-level coach. I had him in my top 10 going into the year, maybe right outside. Maybe had him at like 11 or 12. But I think Harbaugh is a legitimate Coach of the Year candidate this year. I mean, really one of the most impressive jobs this year with the Chargers. I think a lot of people, myself included, kind of questioned some of the moves they made in the offseason, getting rid of those receivers, not really having any targets for Herbert to throw to, and it didn't fucking matter because Harbaugh implemented that culture of, you know, the philosophy that he's brought everywhere, the power run game, putting an emphasis on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Excuse me. So I think DeMeco Ryans is really good, but again, this is only his second year as a coach where Harbaugh, both NFL and college, has dominated. So I think he gets the advantage for the coaching matchup there. Whereas with quarterback, I don't really think it's that close. As much as I like C.J. Stroud and as high as expectations I had for him, he's nowhere near Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, to me, is the 5th best quarterback in the NFL, a superstar level guy who could take you and me and be productive. That's the impressive thing about Justin Herbert, and I mention this pretty much every time we talk about him, is he doesn't really need weapons. Like, you look at every other great quarterback in the NFL, whenever they, exploded in their production, it's when they got their big weapon. Like, Josh Allen took his big leap whenever he had Stephon Diggs brought in. Kyler Murray had a big bump whenever they brought in DeAndre Hopkins, Jalen Hurts, whenever they brought in A.J. Brown. Well, kind of the opposite of that happened to Justin Herbert. They took away his weapons, and he actually had one of his best statistical seasons where, he's just one of the most productive and efficient. I don't think Herbert is really talked about enough. So we already talked about how much I think the Chargers D-line is going to own the Houston Texans O-line. But also, I think the Chargers have the coaching and quarterback matchup advantage. So that's why I'm going to pick the Los Angeles Chargers in this particular matchup. So now we can move on to the 3-6 matchup in the AFC, which I'm not looking forward to talking about. Obviously, my team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, are on a 4-game losing streak right now. Go back to the start of December, we were 10-3. We were sitting comfortably atop the AFC North, and now we are a 6 seed going into Baltimore as 9.5-point favorites at 10-7. So it turns out, as much fun as we had halfway through this year, we finished with the same record this year than we did last year when we had Rudolph and Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. So, of course, I can't pick my Steelers. With how they're playing right now, it would be totally Yinzer bias. It would be ludicrous for me to pick the Steelers with how they're performing right now. And I get it. One silver lining I think you can point to if you really wanted to make an argument for the Steelers, the one argument is historically the Steelers always play Lamar Jackson very well. You take out the one regular season game we played in Baltimore this year where Lamar was very good, but I also kind of attribute that to the fact that we had a million injuries, particularly in the secondary and to George Pickens, so that game wasn't very competitive. But you look back to earlier this year when our team was fully healthy, Lamar really, really struggled earlier in the year when we played in Pittsburgh. And just looking historically through Lamar's career, we talked about it earlier when we played, is all of his numbers fall off a cliff when he plays the Steelers. So that's really my one silver lining if I had to make an argument for the Steelers winning this one, is Lamar always seems to play down not only against the Steelers but in playoffs in general. But I just think there's so many issues with the Steelers team right now that it doesn't even really fucking matter with how pathetic the Steelers have looked over this 4-game stretch. They've played with absolutely zero heart. Particularly the fucking defense has completely let me down because this is the most expensive defensive unit in the entire National Football League, and they've looked fucking pathetic. They've looked like an absolute joke. The secondary clearly is just not any good right now. The Bengals game made me want to just dump hydrofluoric acid in my eyes really watching that, because they had that one guy, 27, Trice out there trying to guard Jamar fucking Chase. And it was like four straight plays. They just fed Jamar, drove down the field, and got an easy touchdown. And anytime that guy, number 27 on the Steelers, is out there, and I'm sure he will be out there against the Ravens, it's probably better off just not even playing. It's better off just having 10 guys out there than having Trice on the field. That's how fucking terrible that guy was. And I don't know anything about him. I know he's a rookie, but he should never touch the field. Whenever they put in Beanie Bishop instead of him, Beanie Bishop got a pick immediately. So I don't know why Trice was in that game. He better not play any minutes in this game because he's terrible. But yeah, this being the most expensive defense and for them to look this pathetic, I get it, there's injuries, but overall the pass rush has been lackluster. TJ Watt gets double covered and held on every single play. And overall, just a disappointing unit. And the offense as well, supremely disappointing, especially, again, when we go back to that game against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals legitimately have one of the worst defenses in the NFL. They just fired their defensive coordinator because their defense sucked so bad. And we struggled against that defense. Like, that defense really gave our team fits. George Pickens had probably his worst game as a pro against the Bengals. So I just think all the momentum is gone from this Steelers team. There's very little hope. There's a reason why they're 9.5-point underdogs in this game, and that is because there's just not a whole lot going for them right now. Sorry if you hear the cats fighting in the background. Yeah, really the only thing, if you're a Steelers fan, you can rely on is Lamar kind of getting the playoff yips again. And also Zay Flowers is out, which I was kind of surprised. I checked right after we got the news that Zay Flowers was not going to be playing in this game. It didn't move the line at all. I thought he would at least move it a little because that really takes away like the home run, big playability of this Ravens offense. So I was honestly really surprised that the line didn't even move a half a point after Zay Flowers was announced to be out for this game. What do I know, though? I think just with how, overall, in summary, we can move on. Just the Steelers are playing their absolute worst football of the season right now. They look completely unmotivated. The defense looks fucking dreadfully bad. They can't tackle. They can't cover. The offense, it looks like our offense from last year. You know, that game against the Bengals looked like fucking Matt Canada was calling the plays. It's just a really sad thing to see, and I do think the Ravens are going to fucking obliterate us. And it's such a shame because, you know, not that long ago, we were going to host a playoff game, and now I think we're going to be yet another season of just getting fucking pummeled in the playoffs in the first round. So, yeah, I do have the Ravens crushing my Steelers. Just yet another year. So, we can move on now to the 2-7 matchup in the AFC. And we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this one. And that is obviously the Bills hosting the Broncos. The Bills are 9-point favorites in this game for good reason. I think the Broncos defense will keep them in this game, at least for the first half. But I don't think Bo Nix in a playoff environment is going to be able to keep up with who's presumptively going to be the MVP this year in Josh Allen. I mean, he's just been playing on another level, just out of his mind. Now, I do think later on in the playoff bracket, I do think it's going to come back to bite the Bills in the ass how they run this offense. If you've listened to me this year, you've heard me say this a bunch of times. I don't like how their offense has regressed back into, hey, Josh, just be Superman and carry us. And that's what they've been down the stretch of this year. It's really fun to watch. It's really exciting. It's electrifying. Josh Allen's a freak talent, but I don't know if you can win a Super Bowl like that because they've done that how many times in the playoffs where they're like, hey, Josh, put on your Superman cape and carry us to the promised land, and it always comes up short. That's an unrealistic expectation to have one guy carry your whole fucking team, and he's done his best at it in years prior, but his coach has made bad decisions. His kicker, Tyler Bass, single-handedly costed them the game last year against the Chiefs when they were in Buffalo. But I'm getting ahead of myself because just for this single matchup, yeah, I don't really think there's a whole lot to talk about here. It's a 2-7 matchup. We all expect the Bills to crush the Broncos, and I give the Broncos a ton of credit for even being here. The fact that they won 10 games this year, I think they deserve a ton of credit for that. Like Sean Payton, a guy I've given a lot of shit here on this channel. I'm not a big Sean Payton fan, but you have to give him his credit where it's due. I mean, this team, I don't even know what their over-under for wins was going into the year. I want to say like maybe 4.5, 5.5, and for them to be a 10-win team in the playoffs, you know, everyone made fun of the Broncos for taking Bo Nix 12th overall, and he's looked really, really good. I do still think some of it is smoke and mirrors. You know, Bo Nix got a really rough start to the season. He came on as the season went on. Bo Nix really impressed me in that game against the Bengals a couple weeks ago. I know they ended up losing that game to Burrow, but Bo Nix made some big-time plays, some big-time throws in that one. So I'm willing to admit when I was wrong. Bo Nix seems to be a pretty good NFL player. I think the Broncos are going to be a pretty competent team for a while, especially with their defense playing so well. That's something I didn't see coming after, especially last year. You got to think the Broncos were a team that gave up, 70 points in an NFL game to the Miami Dolphins. And for them to turn around, stick with Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator, and for him to build up this defense, they're a dominant unit. Patrick Surtain's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year. He's an absolute shutdown, one of the best players in the league right now. So, like I said, I do think, at least for the first half of this game, the defense will keep them in the game. It's such a good unit. But ultimately, I don't think Bo Nix is going to be able to keep up with Josh Allen. That's as simple as it is. So we can move on now. Yeah, I have the Bills obviously winning this one. Let's go over to the NFC now, where we have the 4-5 matchup between the Vikings and the Rams. And this will be played on Monday night. Now, we just got the news that this is going to be played in the Arizona Cardinals Stadium due to all the fucking insane wildfires out in Los Angeles. If you're affected by that, I can't even tell you how sorry I am. I mean, that some of the pictures coming out of LA right now is just literally out of a fucking apocalyptic horror movie. So, really, really, our thoughts are with you guys in LA. That's fucking terrible. But as for this playoff matchup here, the Vikings become the only 14-win team in the history of the National Football League to be a wild card team and have to go on the road as a 14-win team. That is absolutely fucking crazy. You could argue this is one of the best years in the history of the Vikings franchise, and they're still a wild card team. It's absolutely insane. So I don't know how much moving the site of this game affected the line, because I want to say, I could be wrong on this, but I want to say when I checked it a couple days ago before they announced they were moving it to Arizona, that the Rams were actually favorited in this matchup. But now I'm looking at it right now, and the Vikings are 2.5-point favorites because they're on a neutral site. And we know the Rams, they don't have the greatest fan base. I do expect the Vikings fan base to travel more. So this is more likely going to be a Vikings home game more than it's going to be, Rams, even though it's closer to LA. The Rams fans, especially with all that, like we just said, all that shit going on in LA, I don't know if people are going to have time to go to a fucking football game with all the shit going on out there. I'm rolling with the Minnesota Vikings here. I think that they're just overall a better team. Now, the Rams are definitely a team you don't want to match up against in the first round. They've been playing really good football lately. We know that when they're healthy, they can beat any team in the NFL. We saw that down the stretch of last year. We saw that this year. They've already beaten the Minnesota Vikings this year. That one was in LA. I think it's really hard, though, to beat the same team twice in a season. Obviously the Vikings have one of the best coaching staffs in the league. They're going to be dissecting every point of that film from that game and really trying to see what to, change and all that. Now, the interesting thing, though, is, and I'm kind of defying my own logic, is when we do the quarterback and coaching matchup, I think actually both of those favor the Rams. When you look at coaching, I'm taking Sean McVay over Kevin O'Connell. As much as I like Kevin O'Connell, he ain't Sean McVay. I think Sean McVay's the second best coach right now in the NFL behind Andy Reid. And Kevin O'Connell is the direct protege of Sean McVay. Kevin O'Connell was the right-hand man of Sean McVay. He came from McVay's coaching tree, so you got that interesting matchup there between, the master and the apprentice. And then for the quarterback matchup, yeah, Darnold has played really well, but obviously he flamed out against the Lions in that gotta-have-it game in Detroit just last week. And in a playoff environment, I trust Stafford more. So you might ask, why am I picking the Vikings to win this game? Well, I just think they've been overall so absolutely dominant, Whereas the Rams, I think, have been a lot more up and down this year. The Vikings, yeah, they've had moments where they've concerned me, particularly last week against the Lions. But overall, I think they've been a far more consistently dominant team throughout the stretch of this year than the LA Rams. I think they have the best defensive coordinator in the league right now with Brian Flores, who this defense, it's not like they're loaded with, Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu and fucking Lawrence Taylor. Like, they don't really have the greatest personnel in that Vikings defense, but through the scheme and the coaching of Flores, it's one of the most productive units in the league this year. I mean, it's absolutely insane how good that Vikings defense is. And when Darnold is on, and for majority of this year he has been on, their offense has been one of the best in the league. They have so many great weapons. They have so much firepower on that offense between the receivers, Cook, not Cook. I'm thinking of Dalvin Cook. He ain't there anymore. I'm thinking of Aaron Jones, T.J. Hawkinson, the great coaching mind of Kevin O'Connell. So it's a fun matchup for sure. These teams are kind of similar in the fact that the way they're constructed, obviously, because Kevin O'Connell comes from the McVay philosophy. So it's going to be interesting to see those two guys match up They're so familiar with each other, but I think overall the Vikings have been a more consistent team this year. I like their roster overall better. They have a better defense. I'm going with the Vikings in this one, but if the Rams do end up winning this one, I'm going to talk about in my review how this kind of defied my own logic because the quarterback and coaching matchup advantages do go to the Rams in this one. Now we can move on to the 3-6 matchup we have between the Washington Commanders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we did see this matchup earlier in the regular season. It was actually week 1 where the Bucs absolutely slaughtered the Commanders. Obviously, I don't really take a whole lot away from that because that was Jane Daniels' first start in the NFL. We now know he's actually a really good quarterback. And this isn't the same Commanders team. Obviously, they brought in Marshawn Lattimore, an absolute difference maker on their secondary, who's really, really helped them out since he got back from the injury. This is, for me, one of the most difficult games to pick. They have Tampa favored by 3 points. Obviously, it is in Tampa. That makes sense. I really see this one as a coin toss. For me, this is the most difficult game to pick for the regular season. Or excuse me, what am I talking about, the regular season? The wild card round. I guess I'm going to roll with Tampa Bay in this one just because I think Baker, at this point in time, is a better quarterback than Jane Daniels. I think Todd Bowles is better than Dan Quinn. I'm going to revert back to my simple philosophy there of quarterback coaching matchup. Baker Mayfield doesn't get talked about enough how good Baker Mayfield has been this year. I mean, 41 touchdowns to 16 picks. He's thrown 4,500 yards. Like, Baker Mayfield kind of low-key having an MVP level season this year. Not really a whole lot of people talking about it, especially when they went down with those injuries to Godwin and Evans. Like, most teams probably would have just collapsed, but through the leadership of Baker and Todd Bowles, they were able to keep it alive. And Washington, they're kind of just playing with house money. Like, the fact that they even won 12 games is fucking insane. But you have to give Washington so much credit this offseason. They just completely cleaned house with their organization. New owner, new GM, new coach, new quarterback, new everything. And it already is paying dividends with them being a 12-win team and in the playoffs. So as much as I like Tampa and like Baker, this is not a shoo-in. Like I said earlier, I really do think this is a coin toss. It could go either way. The Commanders have been a very resilient team throughout this year. Even when they get down in games, they've stayed in games. You look back to the incredible Hail Mary throw against the Bears, which really just crushed the Bears season. I don't think they won a game after that. You look at their win against the Eagles. I know Jalen Hurts got injured in that game, but I think they were down like 17-0 or 14-0 to start off that game, and they were able to fight all the way back to winning that game with the final play of the game through Jane Daniels, who's just an absolute baller. He's so clutch. So I'm not writing off the Commanders. This isn't one where I'm super confident, but I just think Baker more consistent. I like Todd Bowles more than Dan Quinn. Give me the Bucs in this one. And then we have our final matchup for Wildcard Weekend. Obviously not chronologically, but on this graphic here between the Eagles and the Packers. Kind of crazy that Green Bay ended up being the 7th seed again because they were the 7th seed last year as a 9-win team. This year as an 11-win team, they're back to being the 7th seed. So the Eagles are 5-point favorites in this one. The really concerning thing for me in this one is we don't even know if Jalen Hurts is playing in this football game. We have no idea. There's been no word one way or another if he's getting better from the concussion. He got that concussion a couple weeks ago against Washington. That was a couple days before Christmas. And now we're at a point where he's still in concussion protocol. The game is, what, tomorrow or Sunday? Let me see. Yeah, it's Sunday. So we're 2 days away from this game being played, and we have absolutely zero fucking idea if Jalen Hurts is going to play or not. So if it's taken this long to announce, that really, really worries me about Jalen Hurts' odds of playing this game. I mean, that's really, really concerning. And it's very likely you could end up where you're playing a playoff game with Kenny Pickett as the starter, which, you know, obviously Steelers fan, there's still always a special place in my heart for Kenny. I defended him a lot on this channel, but let's face reality, just not a very good option there. So for me, this game all comes down to if Jalen Hurts is playing or not. I mean, it's very obvious. If Jalen Hurts plays, it's not even a given that they're going to beat the Packers. We know the Packers have one of the most lethal offenses in the NFL. Jordan Love's kind of banged up, but Jordan Love is for sure playing in this one. Christian Watson is out for this game, so that does take away a bit of their over-the-top ability for this game, but they've established one of the best run games in the league this year with Josh Jacobs being an absolute monster, bringing that power rush element to Green Bay. Their defense has been vastly improved with the new coordinator, bringing in McKinney. I can't remember right now. But I'm going with the Eagles. I'm going to just go with the assumption that Hurts is going to play in this game. If Jalen Hurts doesn't play, obviously give me the Packers. There's no way I could pick Kenny Pickett to beat this Green Bay Packers team. There's just absolutely no way it can happen. Even though he's surrounded by so many good players, Kenny Pickett's just such a limited player, and that was on full display in that game where Hurts got injured. He came in with a 2+ touchdown lead against the Commanders and was able to blow it because he can't really do anything. Like, he really just bad. If Hurts does play, though, this is one of the most destructive units in the league. This offense is so stacked. There's really nothing you can do to stop this Eagles offense when it's humming, because if you want to try to take away the run game, which is what my Steelers tried to do when we played the Eagles, we took away Saquon. Saquon was pedestrian that game. But what did that do? That opened up the pass game, and Jalen Hurts fucking carved apart our defense, where A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both fucking feasted on our defense. Or you could try it the other way. Let's try to take away the passing game. Okay, then Saquon's going to just casually run for 250 and 3 touchdowns. And you even have Jalen Hurts as a dual threat ability. So it's like, how do you stop this team when it's fully humming? That's why I have always been, I think, higher on the Eagles than most people. I'm not gonna quite say yet. I guess I could say now. Who gives a fuck? I do think the Eagles are coming out of the NFC. If Hurts is healthy, it all depends on that. If Jalen Hurts is healthy and plays this whole playoffs, I have Philly going to the Super Bowl. That's how highly I think of that offense. And their defense has really started to come around now with the defensive line. Jalen Carter being an absolute fucking monster. They figured out their secondary with the 2 rookies, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, automatically Pro Bowl level players. It all, like I said, I'm going to end it now because I keep repeating myself, but it all comes back to Hurts. So if Hurts plays, give me the Eagles. If he doesn't, give me Green Bay because I just don't trust Kenny. But that has been it for all my NFL Wildcard Weekend predictions. Definitely let me know all your thoughts and your predictions down in the comments. Are you going to be betting on any of these games? If you made it this far in the video, really appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe.